Hi there, welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Cantan.
And I'm Dave Higgins.
And this week we're going to be talking about author platforms, which is a technical kind of term, I guess. It can be a bit nebulous. But before we do that, we're going to talk about what we've been doing in the world of writing this week. And as usual, Dave will go first.
Okay, well, this week, as usual, outlined, written, polished, and published another episode of Seven Stones on my website and on various social media. I also got the final cover for the second compilation, so that's now on pre-order with the retailers that offer pre-orders to indie publishers, with a release date of next Friday, the 3rd of June. And that's also on special offer until release. So if you like Seven Stones, or if you just want to introduce yourself to something great, very cheap, then grab it on pre-order.
Yep, I definitely recommend it. I already pre-ordered the second one, and because I'd read the first one, obviously, in editing it. So I'm looking forward to it, because I don't know, I prefer having a Mobi file go direct to my Kindle. I'd rather pay to do that than read it on a website.
Lots of people do, and it's quite surprising. Well, it's quite surprising until I think about the way that I interact with the internet. As before e-readers and so on, if I got a long article on the internet, I'd print it out, because reading more than about a screen of text gets wearing. So there are a lot of people who are prepared to pay to have the Mobi file, the EPUB, or even a PDF of several episodes together, rather than going to my website. Which is,
yep. Well,
but yeah,
at least I want to anyway. So
you want to several people are chasing me for the ebooks. A couple of people are chasing me to release it in hard copy. So paperback is, they like it, but they want a paperback to put on the shelf. And so someone who can get it for free, but they're prepared to pay the cost of a paperback to have it.
Well, the same as Andy Weir had with The Martian.
Yeah.
That he had it on his website for free, and people said, could you please put up a Mobi? And then it became a bestseller. I mean, it makes sense to me, at least. I'd prefer, like, as well, buying it on Amazon means that my Kindle and my phone are both synced, so then I can read a bit on work when I got a free minute, and I can then read it on my Kindle at home, and works best. As for me, I edited Shiny New Swindle, and I had a look at my tracker system, which tracks how many hours I've used on different things, and I've used 82 hours editing that stupid book because I've continually been trying to get it to kind of catch on, because I like it, but it's not going to. So that was kind of the final edit. I had there's an editor called Kit Duncan on Fiverr who went through it, and she found some bugs that were worth squashing. Things like dashes and M dashes and stuff like that. So it wasn't the worst possible stuff. She pointed out that I was using dashes, N dashes, and M dashes in different places interchangeably, which some people at least would get annoyed by. Otherwise, it was just a few little things here and there. It wasn't that much, really, because it's already been edited by another editor, and edited by me at 82 hours worth. So yeah, so I did that. Then I started editing Blood Cruel, or doing the second draft of Blood Cruel, and realized that I have to write an entire novel by July 10th, a completely different novel for a bundle, whereas Blood Cruel isn't due until August, the start of August. So I had to kind of switch gears in my head and start planning out the novel for the bundle on July 10th, because otherwise it won't get done. I mean, it's only 6 weeks away, and it's going to be a pretty big novel, I think. So that meant I then burnt myself out a bit by trying to, whilst I was juggling all that, I was kind of trying to figure out how I could do both, as usual, and then realized I couldn't do both, and then kind of burnt out by Friday, and kind of on Friday just went, oh, forget it, I won't do any writing today. So that was my week. Like usually I can tell when I'm kind of got to the limits, and I kind of cut myself some slack then, because I do write usually about 2.5 to 3 hours of writing plus my day job. So when I am getting close to burnt out, it's important to kind of allow myself to say, okay, it's fine, I'll drop the writing for today. Yep, that was me. So, author platforms. Author platform is kind of a complicated or a vague term for what I would call an author's connection with the readers. So it can be any kind of form it takes. Like I would say that the primary form that every published author has is their books. That would be an author platform, I would say. And that's the main one. I mean, if you want to talk to readers, usually they are going to be talking to you in a way by reading your books. It's a one-way communication system, but
yeah, definitely. Each book you write is saying, in potentially the most valid way, this is what my books are like. So each book is an advert for all of the others, which is why a lot of indie publishers with a solid career rather than some sort of social media engine driven behemoth thing say the first thing you do after you've published a book is publish a second one, because once you've got 2 books you can start doing things, but nothing else matters more than that second book. But then lots of people say you can build your platform before you release any books. So you don't, then books, whilst they are potentially the best advert, because if someone likes a book by you, they're going to probably think, well, I'll like other books by this person. Whereas anything else, it's one step removed from the book. So there's one more step for them to take before they go from, well, I've seen that, to, well, maybe I'd like to read this person's books.
Because every kind of step removed you are from books is a potential kind of loss of percentage of people who are, like if someone connects with you on Facebook, there's only a certain percentage of them who are going to be interested in reading your books. Or there'll be a certain percentage who are interested in reading any books, and then only a certain percentage of them who are going to be enjoying your particular books. So the books are the number one thing, and the thing that's often overlooked is the author's note at the back of the book, which is a potential way of, again, one-way communication of you connecting with your readers, where the danger is for authors to not realize that they have something interesting the readers want to know. So I've certainly fallen into this trap a lot, where you go, well, my life is kind of boring. What the heck am I going to talk about? Whereas the readers mostly are interested in your process. Like, it's the same as the commentaries on DVDs or behind the scenes stuff or whatever it happens to be. People want to know, why did you write this book? What's interesting about this to you? Why did you choose these characters or choose this scenario or whatever it happens to be? What was going through your mind as you read it? Or even just how's your day-to-day life? So I would say that's kind of the second. So the books are number one on your connection with readers, and the author's note is number two. And I wouldn't say that I have them cracked by any means. My author's notes I always struggle with, and they're always kind of done at the last minute, just before the book's about to come out, which is a mistake. But yeah, they're very important. Certainly, I've read plenty of author's notes that I've found very interesting as a reader. What do you think, Dave?
They're a risky proposition, because the book is the book. The reader reads into it whatever they want, which means if they come to the end and they read an author's note that says, here's what I was thinking about when I wrote it. It was really surprising when this character became as important as they did, because when I first outlined it, they were just there to do this particular thing, and then suddenly they turned out to be a major part of the book. If the readers agreed with that, then it's that sudden I found my people moment that there's not as powerful as when you go to university or school or whatever and join a society, and for the first time you're with people who think the way you do. But if the author's note says something to the reader that they think, wow, this author thinks like I do, then it's what Seth Godin calls modern tribalism. They are very likely to seek out more of your books because they feel that emotional connection to you, that your thoughts and their thoughts will fit well together, that they're going to like you. And because they're not going to actually probably meet you, their liking translates into them getting your books. But if at the end you get an author's note which says, and I wrote this story to point out that fundamentally monetarism is an evil that can only be defeated by radical socialism. And the readers read this story that's about a man coming to terms with his shaky relationship with his parents, and they haven't got this political subtext that the author thinks drove it. They think, well, that wasn't the book I read. Does this person even know what they're talking about? And despite the fact that it's the same person who's written the story they've enjoyed, their mind is going, this person's opinion is shaky. And so they associate that with your author name. So, and there is a slight risk to too passionate an author note at the end. And sort of share interesting things, but don't necessarily make it, and this is the world's most brilliant book about cheese juggling. Because the reader didn't find that, your passion could turn against you. Whereas if you just bring it in, well, cheese juggling was one of the things that influenced this, it's going to have potentially, still going to have the hook the people who like cheese juggling, but it's not going to make people think, oh, this author's all about cheese juggling and I don't like cheese juggling.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. The one way is to be, so it'd be kind of Hollywood in the 1950s versus Hollywood now. So Hollywood in the 1950s, you didn't know that Rock Hudson was gay or that, you know, anyone's personal life or whatever. So you just put your own vision onto who you saw on the screen, the characters they were playing, but you didn't know anything about the actor. Whereas now you know every intimate detail of every single actor if you want to. You can find all of that out.
Yeah.
Which then makes you look at a particular movie and go, well, that guy spouts racist garbage. I'm not going to watch any of his movies anymore, or whatever it happens to be. So for authors, I think the vast majority of us are able to hide ourselves away if we want to. We don't have to represent our personal views in anything. I think they do seep through in the books. I was just reading Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein, and I don't know, I know nothing, absolutely nothing. I haven't done any research at all, but this guy, Robert Heinlein, seems to like the military. I would say from reading this book, it is so pro-military. It almost goes to the state where you go, maybe this is an ironic statement about the military.
It might be. Heinlein's a brilliant example of the way that explaining too much would potentially damage your audience hook at the end. There's Starship Troopers. Some people see it as valiant veterans fighting the bug menace and consider analogies with modern world politics, with America fighting the insert thing that you've decided to demonize as being bugs. And other people see that it's clearly satire, that it's all too jingoistic, it's all too, everything's dialed up to 11. And they're doing this because they are right. They have a manifest destiny. And actually the reason humanity is getting slammed by the bugs isn't because the bugs are evil. It's because humanity spread out into bug territories and went, well, we're not sharing with the bugs. And it just happens that the bugs are a better fighting life form. So it's a satire of militarism. So, and Starship Troopers, that, well, if you put at the end, this is what the book is about, the people who think it's about veterans are either going to go, well, yeah, I like this Heinlein guy, or what is he doing pissing on the veterans? Or there's sort of, if you put at the end that it's not about, you're going to get the other reaction. And
yeah,
some of his other sci-fi is even more polarizing.
Well, I mean, Stranger in a Strange Land, which I read, I don't know, a couple of years ago, maybe, I would say is more polarizing than this is.
Yeah, Heinlein spawned an almost religious movement. I mean, not as religious as the Scientologists coming out of Hubbard, but like a quite different social structure. Right? Libertarianism and polygamy and rights, so on. And if lots of people, including myself, like Heinlein, but don't ascribe to don't ascribe to the perfect world scenarios in Stranger in a Strange Land and some of the other more social wackiness ones. Because other people build their lives around it, try to build communes that follow the tenets of Heinlein's truth. If you put a note at the end of the book, final note at the end of the book saying, well, clearly this book demonstrates the ideal role for men and women in an enlightened society, and anyone who disagrees with it should lock themselves in a small box and tape their mouth shut, then he's going to lose a lot of readers. Whereas if you go to the end and said, well, this is a sci-fi book, I wanted to explore what society would be like if we took this really wacky idea and just made it happen, because that's what sci-fi is, he'd lose the people who thought he was writing to them about their ideal society. I think sort of this is the thing with all the author notes, that exposing yourself to the reader to an extent is great because it humanizes you. And a book is enjoyable or not. But what you really want isn't people to have enjoyed your book. What you want is for people to have enjoyed the book that you have written. So if they see another book with your name on it, they get that one as well. Because you want to get beyond the I'm enjoying this book, so I want to finish it, to I'm enjoying this book, so I want to read more that this person has written, because then they'll go on to buy other books rather than just potentially buying more books in the same series and then stopping. So I think whilst author notes are great for transferring the joy they feel coming out of your book into you as a representation of that joy, they also risk exposing you as being something that's not so aligned with them. So if it's Ender's Game, if Orson Scott Card put at the end of Ender's Game his view on what the book was about, it might have still sold, but would it have got the same audience? Or has it got such a large audience and a large critical following because it's a good book, but it's a different book depending on whether you accept his worldview or not?
I mean, there's a lot to be said for the artist not imposing their view of their own art on the people who are enjoying it, because you put something out and it's not necessarily going to be interpreted the way you want it to be interpreted, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Like some art is intentionally obscure on purpose, like Andy Warhol's soup cans. I wouldn't say we're intentionally pushing across anything. Perhaps I'm wrong. I'm not an expert on art, but I would say that was up to the interpretation to then say, oh, this is about commercialism and, you know, everything being packaged and mass consumed, or this is about how nice soup is, or whatever it happens to be. So yeah, that sort of notes. I would say perhaps an idea is to think of it as a way to give a short story about you. So a kind of a truthful short story about your life that doesn't necessarily have to relate to the book in question. It can be just something that happened whilst you were writing it in real life. You know, whatever you want to talk about. Piers Anthony, I remember there was an author's note where he talked about getting scratched by a cat and then getting a fever. Stephen King on writing talks about his car accident that almost killed him. Which, you know, those two at least have stuck with me, so that says something. The other thing I thought of, actually, whilst we were talking about it, is when I watch an episode of Game of Thrones, the next thing I want to do after it's over is look at a YouTube video of people discussing it and saying what their theories are and what they think the characters are thinking. So a potential could be to include a discussion of the book that's not by you. That someone else who's read the book in advance of publishing then says, I'm Joe Blogs, and this is what I think was happening with this character, and blah 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 blah. You don't say I've talked to the author and found this stuff out. You just say, Dave Higgins was kind enough to let me read this in advance of publishing, and when I read it, I thought this character was great and this situation was interesting and whatever. So kind of a discussion of the book, which gives people a kind of an outlet, a way to kind of think about it themselves and think about, well, what did I think about that character, without the author dictating what the character should be. Because the author, it could be seen as the author says, well, I have the definitive view because I wrote it, whereas a friend or whoever it happens to be talking about the book, well, that's not a definitive view. They didn't create the book, so they could be wrong. So that means that the person reading it can then say, well, I think differently, so I can be just as right as this person.
I've seen variation, a possible variation on that. It's sort of some books, it's more in the sort of more, this is literary fiction rather than this is genre fiction end thing, have questions for discussion at the end of the book aimed at reading groups. So again, that's not the author saying this is what the book is about. It's asking the reader, what do you think the book is about?
Those questions can be quite leading, though.
Yeah. You'd have to do it well to use it for. So yeah, this is where the writing it thing comes in. That I suspect, for some people, the leading questions are the point of it. That you're making people think about the kind of things you wanted there to be. And sometimes it's just someone can be a great writer, so you enjoy their fiction, but their social presentation is different from yours in a way that doesn't gel. It's something that I've encountered a reasonable amount, being British public school with all of the reservation and self-effacement that comes with that with some author notes written by American authors, I like the book, and then it gets to the end and the author note starts off with, thanks for reading, you're utterly awesome for getting this far, and here's some extra stuff to give to all you awesome people who are awesome for getting this far. And here's a story about it, and it features my wonderful wife, and it's starting to give me the yes, because that's not the way that British people express themselves. And intellectually, I can see that, well, it's a great book, so you're entitled to say thank you to people for getting to the end. You're entitled to enthuse about your work, and you're entitled to share these stories about wonderful things that have happened. And the fact that someone could not think their wife was wonderful is odd to me. But intellectually, that works. But emotionally, people saying it as a kind of American car salesman in your faceness, it goes odd, which might be why I have issues with an author's note that really bigs up anything. It's just putting things out there and letting people draw their own conclusions is very much more the way I approach life. So,
as I say, there's a lot to be said for an artist putting their art out there and then letting the reader or the viewer, whatever it happens to be, put their own interpretation on it, because 50% at least of any story is in the reader's mind. So expanding it out a bit, the next thing I would say is an author website. Actually, sorry, I'm skipping something. The next thing I would say out of that is your page on Amazon first, the author page on Amazon, with, you know, your picture and a few paragraphs saying, blah blah, was born in such and such and got a job as a used car salesman. So that would be the next thing most people would see, because that pops up on the Kindles. If you click on the author name, that's what they next see.
You click on the author name, it takes you to, yeah. So you want your, or on other sites, if they offer it, because Smashwords offers you the ability to edit some of that. Some of the other sites offer you the opportunity to have a brief author bio or whatever. So yeah, you want, if someone enjoys your book and thinks, oh, I wonder what else they did, they're probably going to go back to the retailer they bought it from. So having your more than just other books you've written, so it gives that air of professionalism, of personality again. So yes, that draws you in.
I think at a minimum it needs to say such and such wanted to be a writer since blah, and, you know, has been writing for so many years, and these are the series they've made. That's probably 70%, 80% of most authors' bios. Some people can make a kind of a funny one, which again is a chance to bond with readers. It risks, of course, people saying, well, that wasn't funny. But if you're confident enough, you can make one like that.
Yeah, jokes are hard. Jokes are very hard to devise. Yeah. What you want is something that says interesting, that shows you as being a creative person, because whatever your target reader, your ideal book buyer is like, one of the qualities they're going to have is that they're looking for someone who is creative. Even if they're looking for a non-fiction author, they're looking for someone who can take facts and express them in a creative way that makes them more accessible. So, Jeff, your bio, the facts you put in, it's like, these are the books that they've written, these are the series they're in. But you don't want to make it, Simon has written 36 books. These are the series that Simon has written. Simon likes writing. Simon has written for 10 years. Because it doesn't catch the reader. You ought to find a way to make those facts more than just a bullet list.
I mean, it's difficult because I struggle with my own bio, because putting in anything about computer programming is like a death knell. Like, that's not going to, most people are not going to be interested unless I was writing, if I was writing about like AIs overtaking the world. That was my MO. Then I could say I've been a computer scientist for 20 years, which would give some weight to the fact that I know something about computer science. But when you're writing about, you know, humorous fantasy or something, then computer science has an air of dullness about it. So people will go, well, these jokes aren't going to be funny, are they? Computer scientists aren't well known, or programmers aren't well known for their sense of humor. So then you have to kind of look at your your personal life. So you get people like I'm just dipping into Jared Durrell's My Family and Other Animals at the moment, and I'm guessing his bio is pretty good. I haven't looked at it, but I'm guessing Gerald Durrell's bio on Amazon would be fairly good, because he can say, I've lived 20 different places and collected all different animals and all this kind of stuff. And that's interesting stuff. But for most people, it'll be difficult to fill in, but you just kind of have to do the best with what you got. So the next thing out would be your website, I would say. And the website's primary function for an author is showing off your books and telling people, if they've just read a book, what's next in the series. That's what people want to know. They want to know, what should I buy next so I can read? I like this author. I want to read his or her next book on. Have I got to the end of the series? Is there other things that are similar? That kind of stuff. After that, you can do reviews and stuff like that, but that's not really what people are interested in, and there's not going to be much crossover, I think. I could be wrong. The reviews should be as close, like Dave does reviews of books. That's a much better idea than I've done reviews of movies and TV shows before. So most TV and movie watchers, again, it's a percentage thing. There's going to be a certain percentage that read books, but there's a larger percentage who will never touch a book in their lives. So if you're reviewing books, that's the best idea if you want to fill your website. But I think a website in general, most people are just visiting it, if they know who you are, to find out what book they should read.
Yeah, I don't review books in the expectation that people are going to read a review I wrote of the book and then think, oh, I'll buy one of Dave's books. Because fundamentally, a review is saying, here are reasons why you should and shouldn't buy the book I'm reviewing. So unless you're reviewing your own books, it's talking about buying a book that isn't yours. So the book reviews are there because I review books. I don't do it to draw people into buying my own books. I don't do it to get reviews of my own books in a tit-for-tat sharing. I do it because I like talking about books. I like talking about books that way, rather than talking about books by doing lots of YouTube videos or appearing on book podcasts. Because I prefer the more structured write a review. And also, when you read hundreds of books a year, getting more books is good. So there is a very definite people pay me in books side to my reviewing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting that you were doing it just to get more more readers either. I think my point would be that most people's idea for a website, if they're an author, when they're setting up a website, is that the primary function will be to get more sales, or to connect with readers, I guess, would be the more important thing.
Yeah.
And some readers will read Dave's reviews because they'll have read his books, and then they'll offend his website and they'll go, I wonder what Dave thinks of all these different kind of books. And if, like with most reviewers, you tend to look at a reviewer's review of something you've already read and see if they agree with you. And if they agree with you for a certain number of things, then you'll go, well, I should probably trust this person's opinion. And I'll try and read something that they've read that they give 5 stars to, or whatever it happens to be. And then if they keep if everything you recommend tends to be good, they'll keep reading it. But in general, yeah, in my opinion at least, a website's primary function is what's the next book to read, and what's coming out. What's the author currently writing and is about to release, and when.
There is a theory that an entirely static website doesn't work. That if your website is just, these are the books, and this is the book that's going to come out next, that's okay if a reader comes to it, but there's no reason for a reader to come to it more than once. So the reader has to make the decision, I'll find out what Simon's doing. Which, if they've forgotten about you because you haven't released something for a couple of months, and so they've forgotten that there is another book in the series that they liked, they're not going to go to your website. Whereas if you have some dynamic content, something they can subscribe to, or something that makes them think the website might have changed, they're more likely to come back. At which point they've come back, they see your static message about the next book in the Bitter End series is coming out on this date, whatever. So it's not as you've signed up to get facts as a mailing list, but it's got a broader grip, because with a dynamic content on a website, you're not asking anyone to give you anything. You're just saying there's going to be new content. And so some people who won't sign up to a mailing list because they don't want their inbox full of messages might bookmark your website if it's got more than just a list of your books. So it's coming up with that. And there's also the interest theory, that whilst posting things that aren't, this is the book I'm writing next, doesn't tell anyone about your books, it does open up the possibility that someone will think that was an interesting article on the politics of cheese juggling and share it. Someone comes across it on social media, thinks that's an interesting post on cheese juggling, goes to your website, discovers you've written a couple of other posts that they find interesting, thinks this person can write well and they're quite interesting. I wonder what else they do. And then they see that you write books. They think, well, maybe I'll check one out. So things that aren't about your books can funnel people in, but and I'm using the website to do this as well. So it's definitely, once you've got your, here is a central retailer free site for my books.
I'd say that if that's like, so you're saying, from what you're saying there's a certain percentage of people will read an article and share it, and a certain percentage of the people who see that article will then look at the books. You're kind of a percentage of a percentage of a percentage. Whereas, so I've seen a lot of people who would post up a new blog post every day, or, you know, twice a day even, or whatever it happens to be. Whereas if they'd put as much work into just writing a new book, again, that's the primary author platform. Like if they say they're writing 4,000 words a day of blog posts, 4,000 words a day of a new book would be a far better way to connect, I think, at least.
Well, yes, but you can publish book after book after book, and they're only visible to the people who come across that book. So yes, more books are always important, but also finding another way to find potential readers. if you're writing about local politics, people who find local politics articles will find them in a different place from people who find your books. So
I would say then, so if you're writing House of Cards, for instance, then having a lot of stuff about politics may make a lot of sense, because then you're giving yourself authority on that subject to say, I discuss politics on a daily basis, and here's my book series about politics. I don't know. I think it's a complicated thing, again, just like author's notes, where you have to kind of make a decision for yourself. The other thing to touch on as well, which you mentioned, is mailing lists, which are very important. They're equally as important as a website, I think. I think a website is fairly essential. A mailing list is also essential, as long as you make some use of it. So I would say that, so I have my own personal, my single solo mailing list, and we have the joint mailing list, Dave and I, for our joint books. And the solo mailing list I'm making fairly good use of now. I never was before, but in the last maybe 3 or 4 months at least. And the joint one is kind of falling by the wayside, I think, a little, because I don't know, I think it's easier for me to kind of say, here's what I'm up to, blah, 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 on my solo stuff. But anyway, so a mailing list, I think, even if you're not using it, it is essential to have some way of readers finding out that you have a new book. Amazon has their little alert system that finally works now. After many years, it wasn't working, but it now works.
I still don't get the notifications.
Oh, I do. I don't know whether. I mean, it does ask. I heard that it's only for novels. That it doesn't tell about short stories or something, whatever it was.
Oh.
But like, I'm subscribed to Chris Fox. I get his every time he brings a book out, every 3 weeks or whatever it is. And Garrett, I think I'm following. Garrett Robinson. So I am getting them, but they weren't working before. But a mailing list is a far better way, at least, of letting people know. And some people are happy to sign up to a mailing list. Again, it's what Dave was saying about a website, that if you're giving them a reason to read the emails, that's where it's going to be the most effective. So what I'm doing now is I have, in general, 2 emails a month. At the end of each month, I do an update of what I've just written that month, which it's back to what I was saying earlier. It's about a kind of a peek behind the curtain of what I'm thinking. So I discussed my changing the title of Personal Gods to Blood Cruel and why I'm doing it. I talked about the fact that I'm starting writing Fields of Dust, my post-apocalyptic novel, that kind of thing. And then about halfway through each month, I try and do something else that's interesting. So the end of the month one just went by. I have a thing where Field of Dust is about a post-apocalyptic team sport. So I know I'm going to need a lot of player names. So I said to my list, hey, anyone want to suggest player names? I can't use a full first name, surname. So how about you give me a first name and a nickname, and I'll just put a random surname at the end. So then I got, like, I don't know, about 10 or 12 replies, which is not a lot out of 1,000 people, 1,000 subscribers, but it's some people at least who'll be happy to see their name in a book. But halfway through the month, I generally do a competition, something like that, for signed paperbacks or whatever it happens to be. So yeah, a mailing list in general is very important too. I don't know if you have anything to add to that before we move on, Dave.
Don't think so, no.
So the last thing I was going to mention is social media, which some authors use masterfully to connect with readers, and I don't really. I'm by no means an expert on it. So on Twitter, I retweet things that I think are funny. That's it. Google Plus, I used to be more active on, but now Google Plus seems to have died quite a bit, at least for me. I don't know whether I'm circled with people who are not that active anymore or whatever it is. But in general, it doesn't seem to be as interesting or as active as before. And then Facebook seems to have picked up a bit, but that might be because I'm now in groups with a lot of authors and that kind of thing. But that's connecting with authors. That's not the same as connecting with readers. From what I've heard, it depends as well on your genre, what social media you should be on. So it's a big kind of complicated thing, and it's interactive connections rather than broadcast connections. So the mailing list, for instance, is interactive to a small extent because people can hit reply and talk to you. But it's mostly broadcast because most people won't reply. Whereas on a social media post, anyone can hit the reply button and talk to you. So I think you're not too active on social media either, are you, Dave?
I'm mostly active on Google Plus. I have issues with Facebook, which can't be solved by the settings they have. And they're obscure enough, they're not going to stick new settings on to accommodate my sort of person. So until that gets fixed, I'm not on Facebook. But I am on Google Plus. I'm sort of on Twitter, but Twitter doesn't utterly work for me because I'm a nuanced, broad, all over the place discussion, in-depth kind of person. So 140 characters to express an opinion is the start of my first broad point. And I don't like sticking out here is a broad point because I don't like absolutism. So Twitter is tricky for me to get that something that I think is worth sharing in 140 characters. And also the other thing of Twitter that you can share a quick update works very well if you have a smartphone, but I don't have a smartphone. And carrying a pen and paper around to note down, just saw a cat playing football with a latte cup, so I can tweet it out when I get back to my desktop about 45 minutes later, makes it all seem rather stale. So,
like, I don't know. As a Twitter consumer, I unfollow people if they're just talking about what they had for lunch or whatever happens to be. I just follow people who say funny things. So it's just kind of a way for comedians to try out material, at least in the people I'm following. But in general, as I say, I'm terrible at social media. I interact with any readers who try and talk to me, especially on Facebook. It tends to be mostly people on Facebook. But otherwise, nothing really. But what I would say is that there are certain authors who are masterful at social media, Pinterest or Snapchat or whatever it happens to be, and get a lot of readers because of that. It's just not something that I'd even be inclined to bother trying to master.
Yeah, well, And to an extent, and this is something that's important for choosing how to apply your platform with you as a person existing, that you want to make a platform for the readers you're looking for. So I am not getting any readers through Instagram at all. But on the converse of that, of the 250 books I read last year, none of them I read because I encountered the author or the book on Instagram. So I'm terrible at Instagram in terms of getting readers on it, but it doesn't impact my reading habits either. So potentially my core audience aren't on Instagram. And me doing a huge push on Instagram, focusing on learning how to use it, gritting my teeth and doing the things that don't fit my natural way of interacting would be wasted effort. So, and I'm not on Facebook, but then Facebook doesn't work for me as a person. So it might be wasted effort for me to try and sell books on there anyway.
Yeah, I mean, my audience is definitely on Facebook. So Facebook is kind of old hat. So if my audience was teenagers, it would be completely wasted because they're not there. They're on whatever the newest one is. Snapchat is probably too old now as well. But my audience tend to be at least over 55, more heading into kind of late 60s, 70s, mostly male, and they're mostly on Facebook. They're not on Google Plus. They're not usually not on Twitter. They're on Facebook because someone helped them set it up, or they set it up themselves so they could see the grandkids in photos and whatever it happens to be. So that's where they are. So, and they're kind of happy with that. They don't need to move on to the newfangled whatever, because Facebook does everything they want it to do. As I say, I'm just not very good at it. That's all. So yeah, we're coming up on an hour, so we should probably draw things to a close. Was there anything you wanted to add just at the end there, Dave?
One final thought, that there is a lot of advice out there about building your author platform and when you should do it and when you shouldn't do it and how you should do it. But one thing I'd noticed reading it through myself, trying to work out what I should be doing, is that a lot of it is talking about one of two things, or possibly even conflating the two together, which are network and audience. That some of them are talking about how you build a community of people to support you. So find authors with similar work so you can promote your books to each other's readers and so on. That is what some people talk about when they're talking about platform. That's really a network, like colleagues at work, except you're on your own as a publisher. So you're building a network of colleagues. The other thing is audience, the people you are talking to try and get your book into their hands. And those two groups are potentially very different. Thinking about it, I know several editors, but I wouldn't necessarily think that people who I rate as being good editors are also people who are going to love my book, be my sort of most fervent of fans. So when you're looking at the advice, instead of just going, oh, that doesn't look like my platform, maybe I should be doing that, think, well, are they talking about getting your book in front of new potential readers or getting your new book into the hands of your existing readers? Or are they talking about building an author platform in terms of something to stand on to support you in the way that if you work in an office, your colleagues will support you?
I don't know. I would say that, yeah, I would say they're two very different things. And I would say that an author platform, at least to me, is the stage you're standing on to talk to your audience, rather than the people backstage who you discuss things with and decide how you're going to run the show.
Well, yeah, my point was that not everyone uses the term in the same way. So look for signs of what they mean when they say author platform, rather than reading all of the articles talking about author platform and then going, well, they're saying that I should offer reviews to other authors to build my platform, so I'll do that. I've been offering reviews. Why isn't that getting me readers? Is that?
Yeah, that's, I don't know. Every time you read any piece of advice, even our advice here, you have to think of your own why. So as we say, we're not good at social media, that doesn't mean don't do social media. Or if we say you need a really good author description, but you really hate author descriptions and you don't like any, you just want it to be facts, like this person was born this date, blah, 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 like Dave said, well, then do that. Don't listen to our advice if you don't agree with it. Because this is your career and your, like, if you're going to be an author, make it an interesting kind of, make it personal to you and interesting to you, rather than just following anyone's advice, I think. And you should always be looking at what's the why behind why someone's saying to do something. And if the only why is this worked for me, that's going to be a difficult thing to kind of recreate. Because you need to kind of understand why something worked or why they did it in the first place, whatever it happens to be. Grant, I think we could definitely talk about networking in a future episode, but we've headed past an hour now, so we'll probably stop for the moment.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we've had any write-in questions while we were on air, so yeah, let's bring that to a close.
Grant, thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you next time.